One of my
well, hello everybody. Hello. How's everybody doing? Can't hear me? Oh, darn it. Well, get this sound. We'll turn it up. I mean, obviously, I've got a lot to say. So, is that any better at all? No? Something. Yeah. You gonna try? See? Hello? Maybe? Am I there? Okay. All right. Okay. So, okay, everybody. Hello, everybody. Okay, hi, welcome. Thank you so much. A couple of little things. One is that there are microphones everywhere. And so when you talk amongst yourselves, you're not talking amongst yourselves. So just have an awareness of that is two things. One, if you do say something stupid, everybody will know. And number two, it does disrupt especially the people that are online because they get to hear you a bunch. So if you have an awareness of that, that helps a lot. Anyway, this is wonderful to see the crowd, both here and online. We've got 31 online. So hi all of you online people. Hello, good to see you. So anyway, I guess it's kind of like at the Oscars where it's like, you like me, you really like me. So anyway, couple of things that we should talk through. The basis of this is that I'm on the DMAAR Forms Committee, and the charge was that we would get every addendum reference in the DMAAR purchase agreement put together so that it would match, so that every time a DMAAR purchase agreement said addendum, there was a DMAAR addendum that matched. And we're close. We're working on the financing addendum now. So we're redoing that completely. You'll be happy to know that it will become a single financing addendum, but one page will be contract and one page will be assumption, so that you don't get confused with all the what applies where and all that stuff. So that is happening. That's coming. I wanted to start off first by going through a form that we've had in the system for a little while, the subject to sale form. That was the hardest form that the Forms Committee had to take on. Everybody had a different view, a different thought, a different way that it was going to be. And we're talking in the Forms Committee, we have like brokers and people from all the different companies so that we get a good adoption of forms that we put together. So it was quite the deal to get it done. But I wanted to talk about a couple of things that we did in the subject to sale. One, by it being a DMAAR form, it allows that. We used to always have the problem is you do a subject to sale addendum to somebody, and then they would send you back their notification, which usually didn't match up with, the different sentences and how they worked and what the wording was and that kind of stuff. So by doing this, we have a single subject to sale addendum, and then the notices back and forth between buyers and sellers will match up correctly with the wording that's in there. Couple of things that we did in there is that we put in a condition of the property so that we know right away how the inspection process is going to go in a subject to sale. We never knew that before. It's like, okay, when are we going to do the inspection, blah, blah, blah. So we put that in there so that it was solidified that within a certain amount of time, you're going to inspect the property, like if it's however long after you get it or after the offer comes in. And it tells you about that. And so we put that in there. So make yourselves aware of that. Also with the when you serve notice, especially when the buyer or the seller serves notice that they have another offer, and they serve notice to the buyer that they have a period of time. We left the period of time with a blank space. Okay, so you have ability. It was recommended by counsel that it be not less than 24 hours. And I know that flies in the face. It flies in the face of my training, my teaching over the years. Because I'm like, shorten that crap up. But what the council said was that your notice had to be given, and there had to be a period of time to respond to that notice. So Bill Starangeli, who's our attorney, recommended that we put in there not less than 24 hours. That doesn't keep you from writing a lesser time in there. But if you do, it does open you up to maybe some adjudication down the road of they didn't give us enough time, we could have, like that. So we did do that. We did set up two things. One of the things we found over the years, and it frustrated me, is that we used to have a form that if you were served notice by the seller that they wanted you to prove up, at the point you received that, you no longer had the option of saying, I've got my house sold. It was never available. But more than 70% of the agents I interviewed believed that if they sold their house in that 24 or 48 hours, then that was okay. So it wasn't what was on the form, but that's how it had been applied. So then as I talked around to different companies, realized that it was about 50-50 for brokerages. Half of them actually had a clause that the buyer had an opportunity to receive an offer in that 24 or 48 or even 72-hour period, and it would be considered a removal of the subject, but it stays subject to closing. The other half believed, like Ira Realty, First Realty had it like that. I think all of the Remaxes, except Revolution, changed theirs, but it had the thing where you get the notice, you either prove that you can buy it without selling yours or you're done. So we combined those and we created this. This has where the buyer has an opportunity to get an offer on their property within the time frame that they have. Let's call it 48 hours. So in that 48-hour time frame, they have an opportunity to accept an offer, remove the contingency, and it still stays subject to closing. Okay, so it's a great advantage. The couple of caveats is the offer they accept can't be a subject to sale. Okay, so they can't have an offer and those people have to sell their house. We did stop with that. Okay, we don't need a string of 4 subject to sales going on. That doesn't make any sense. So we did that to make sure that didn't happen. Now, have an awareness, there are people who absolutely hate the idea that the buyer gets that opportunity because they're stuck in this, what about if that cash offer, non-contingent, 10,000 over, comes in and wants to close in 2 weeks? Okay, that's not gonna happen. All right, we're done with those. We're done with those. It could. Well, we're done with those times. But listen, if that's your mindset, if you're all gigged out about that, every form that we have and that DMAAR offers, even though it's copyrighted, you can't text over, you can't write out, but you can line through and you can add. So if you don't like something, line through it. It's okay. All right. So if you're of that mindset, you're the seller, they're like, oh my God, there's no way I'm gonna do that. Well, fine, line through it, initial it, send it back to as a counter. Yes, sir.
Is it still voluntary on companies that adopt this?
There's no possibility of forcing a company to use DMAR forms.
So some still do not.
I think there's still a couple out there. We've tried to, get adoption. The reason for having all the multiples and forms committee is so everybody gets to say, Vic, I told you couldn't answer it. I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
Does this close the loop then, as far as the previous subject to sale? When they remove their contingency, it opens it up that it's renegotiating the contract. You could accept the backup offer. It's changing the original contract. And so both parties have to sign off on it. So in the old subject to sale, if I had a subject to sale 72 hours and I got another offer in and they remove their subject to sale, they could provide financing. That we up both as an open option at that point.
No.
We lost deals because of that.
You shouldn't have. If that was the case, because them removing their contingency doesn't change the contract. It follows in line. It's like removing the financing contingency or the inspection contingency. It is the contingency of the contract.
But the subject to still had two options on it. They had.
This does, yes.
The old one did too.
With the old one had that you could say no, or you could prove that you could buy it without selling. That was it. Okay. So what the new one says is that the buyers have whatever time frame that they're given, 24, 48, 72, whatever that time frame is, they have an opportunity after notice. They have that period that they can accept an offer on their home, remove the contingency, but keep the subject to close in it. So it's the same as if they did all the subject like that and they got an offer and they sent that to the seller and says, hey, we got an offer on our house. So it's the exact same thing as that. That time frame of being able to do that is extended through the notice period. So it's just as if you had a subject to sale and you're going along and the buyers got an offer on their house and they accepted it. Same thing, same conditions, same everything. No changes to that. It's just that extra time is allotted to them. So they have that. The other part of this is that you through the notice paperwork, hi Sarah, through the notice paperwork, you get the opportunity paperwork to create a closing date. And that wasn't in there before, so that was up in the air. So we tried to tighten it up a little bit in the process. Okay? Any other questions? Yes.
So if I decide there's something in here I want to change procedurally and I strike it.
Yes.
Then do I use the purchase agreement addendum or do we have a subject to sale addendum?
No, if you're striking something in here, you would just line through it and that would be it. You'd line through an initial.
Change the verbiage on it. What do you guys see?
No, you can add a second page or blank page, or you can do an addendum to the addendum, an additional addendum. So I mean, whatever works, whatever you feel good about. Yeah, that's totally fine. Okay.
Keep it going, dude.
I'm not-
It's gonna be a long 2 hours.
It is a long 2 hours. That's why I took, because I knew there'd be a lot here. Okay, that's subject to sale. Other questions, always feel free to call. So always feel free to call. Well, somebody's leaving me notes actually. So, okay. The purchase agreement, yay. We finally have a new purchase agreement and everything in it was gone over. Every single line of the purchase agreement was read through, discussed, and either added to or taken away from, or words changed, punctuation. Every single line, there was no line where we're like, oh, yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's good. None of that happened. So it's been gone through with a fine-tuned comb by 6 people on the forms committee. And then after that, it was submitted to the board of directors 3 different times for them to give their input, taken back to the forms committee, worked over that input, and then changed and put back again. So it has been perused quite heavily to the point where I was getting pretty frustrated with the process, because I'm like, come on. And understand, as we go through all of these, understand there's no such thing as the perfect document. There's going to be a comma misplaced, a double space, right? A double space in it, a word that's misspelled, or an S that is left off, or it's just a word that doesn't make sense. Something is going to be wrong in every form. We're just not, we're not that good. And it's gone through all of that. Plus it's gone through, every form has gone to the attorney for the attorney to read through, because we do it different here. And I think it's the right way, is that we take forms and we use a group of qualified, knowledgeable agents. And we put together what we want it to do, what we want it to say that makes sense to us as agents. And after we get that all sorted out and we do the best we can, then we send it to an attorney and have the attorney look it over. Because if you go to the attorney first, and if anybody knows Paul, I harass him all the time about it. If you send it to the attorney first, it comes back with 12 pages, because they just put stuff in just in case. They just put stuff in. So we don't do it that way. So we were able to keep the purchase agreement, even though we added stuff. I think we kept it, what, 6 pages, you know? So it is more pages, but the font was starting to get too small to read, and all kinds of things were going on. So, okay, so purchase agreement, page 1. First thing that happened, we changed the delivery of earnest money, because you basically have 2 options. You either bring a check in or you do it electronically. Okay, that's it. If somebody wants to bring you cash, they go and get a check. They get a money order and bring it in. You can't pay cash. I know back in the day, we used to try that, and we'd write a receipt out and all this other stuff. We just can't do that. So it's either going to be a check. We don't like those because they're a pain in the butt, or it's going to be through trust funds. And the nice thing about trust funds, it's very trackable. You can refund money back through trust funds to the same account, so that works well. And it's verified all the way along. It's an extremely safe environment for people to put money through. So that's why we use it. That's why we liked it. So with that earnest money, we've also added it. It's always been within 3 days, you know, of the offer. We've always had that in there, but we never had any consequence. And so we tend to have people that still think if they don't pay the earnest money, it's not final. You know, it's like, well, I'm not going to pay the earnest money until I do my inspection. It doesn't matter. Your offer is accepted. The earnest money has no bearing on whether or not it's accepted. It is a valid offer, even if you don't turn earnest money in. Okay, it's valid. It's there already. You both agreed. So what we did, because it got to the point where people were like, yeah, I'm going to get that earnest money to you. I'm going to get, yeah, you know, I'm going to get paid next week, or whatever the excuse was. And it was going to 5 days a week, 2 weeks, and we didn't have earnest money. And the problem with that is that we had a seller with their property off the market. And so then you start getting sellers who go like, I'm taking it off until I get to a certain point. And so it just messes the whole system up. It creates problems. So what we did is we created this where it's like, if the earnest money is not delivered within that time, that 3-day time period, All of a sudden, the seller can void the contract. The seller now has power that if you as a buyer don't want to turn it in, the seller can then go, okay, we're done.
That's right away without notice.
That you are given notice right here. This is the notice. This just says, you don't want to turn it in, boom, you're out. Yeah,
Is there a
Sure.
rule on the MLS that we have to take the listing to pending after the offer has been accepted, or can we wait until the earnest money has been deposited?
no, the purchase agreement, it's not the MLS. The purchase agreement says that the property will come off the market. If you don't change the purchase agreement, you have no option to keep it on the market. You want to change the purchase agreement? Fine, change it. But you can't, especially I hear agents, well, that's not how I do business. It's not your decision as an agent. It's not your decision. It's not, it's there. If you're not going to take it off the market, put it pending, then change the purchase agreement so that then you are within the contract to do whatever the seller wants you to do. Okay? So 3 days, you don't get it in, it's voidable until the day you do turn it in. Once you turn it in, then the seller's like, okay, we're done. Yes, sir.
So with trust funds, if they wait a couple days, they do it, are we within the 3 days?
But trust funds, you have to reset after 3 days. Because it's only when you send the email out, it only lasts 3 days. If they don't do it, you have to do it again. Okay? So it has nothing to do with trust funds is a verifiable source. And so the 3 day period or the days for deposit that are part of the law that we have as brokers have to deposit money by a certain time frame, that trust funds is fine. We get notice, it's there, good, we're good. As long as we know they did it, trust funds is a verifiable source, we're in good shape. They immediately send us, they immediately send. The question for everybody online was that with trust funds is it okay if trust funds takes 2 or 3 days, or if you don't do it until the 3rd day and then it takes a couple of days for it to get there, it's completely fine. Okay, that verifiable point, it's considered in. That's been verified by the commission, across the board. So we're good there. Okay.
And the 3 days, Lance, is the same thing as line 227. I mean, that 3 days is as defined in.
Days are days unless it says different. It's days, yeah. It is, there's a difference in, we put that definition of the time frame. The question was about the time frame. We put that definition back in the contract ways. We did that because we reformatted the whole purchase agreement. And so some of those things, they are in some sensible order. And then we also took into effect that we didn't want run over pages. So you'll notice in this that we don't get halfway through a paragraph and then it goes to the next page. We didn't do that. So we worked hard at getting it so it was easy, like your inspection information. Every bit of that's on one page, so you don't have any run over. So we took the liberty of moving some things based on their size of paragraph. We tried to group them so they made sense, and then we used some lines to create that format to be able to do. Yeah, so it's.
Days is days. Yeah. You mean days as business days unless it's specific.
I mean days as defined in the purchase agreement. Yes, yeah. Yeah, days defined in the purchase agreement. So in essence, unless you specifically say calendar days or you specifically say hours, it is always the same. And it's the same in every addendum all the way through the process. Okay? I'm sorry?
The weekends don't apply to those 3 days.
Correct. Okay? So thank you for helping with getting that out, because
It's
it's,
surprisingly not.
I know, I know. Yeah,
Hey, I signed this day one,
no,
the next day.
the next business day, if you signed at 9 in the morning or 11:30 at night, it's the next day. It has to be the next full business day, full day, okay?
That line on line 229.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, it's all, everybody can pick on Ted if you want to. It's fine. It's totally fine. So, yeah. So, there are a few word changes in the new mortgage, but not much. We did put in there a line that says seller to pay buyer's actual closing costs, loan costs, and it defines origination fee, discount points, prepays. The reason that that is in there, and I think it was in there in some format before, but it's so that you don't reiterate that in financing terms, the other financing terms, we used to always have to write it there. And there was this specific sentence that you had to write. That's the sentence, okay? That's what the lenders want. So you don't have to rewrite it in other financing terms. So it's there, okay? And then a quick thing of appraisal. So we get this out and everybody understands, okay? Checking the appraisal box has nothing to do with financing appraisal. Nothing. Whether you check it or not, the financing is there. It is a contingency, and if it doesn't appraise, the lender's not going to loan you the money. You're not going to buy the house. You can't say, I didn't check the appraisal box, so it's not subject to appraisal. It is subject to appraisal if you have financing. If you're paying cash and you don't check the appraisal box, yes, it's not subject to appraisal.
Or if you're a buyer, you're willing to pay the shortage.
If you're a buyer and willing to pay the shortage in between for the additional down payment or whatever, yeah, if you want to do that and write that all out, that's fine. But the verbal thing of like, we didn't check appraisal, so you should accept our offer. It bears no weight because it's going to be appraised. It's going to be appraised.
Well, why do we know?
Because there are cash offers and there are different things like that. Also, a couple of little things about appraisal is if you do check that box, then that says that the appraisal has to be received at least 10 days before closing. I had one. It came in 9 days before closing. It was $15,000 low. We had to go in front of the commission because the seller was like, that, you didn't make it. I'm sorry. My only point to them was, of course, that, you know, closing is on or about. So sorry, you didn't have a locked in date. So there's always something to talk about, but just make sure you know that, and that ordering the appraisal, the onus is on the buyer or the mortgage lender. It's not on you. Don't take that liability on.
So should we click it if we have a client getting financing, or would you ignore it?
It really doesn't make a whole lot of difference, actually.
Except for the scenario that you just.
Well, if you've got cash or you've got different things, but
If they're financing, it doesn't matter.
probably doesn't matter. But that should be explained. I mean, as listing agent, we should be talking to people. Oh, they didn't check appraisal. Well,
But wouldn't it be nice if everybody actually had the appraisal done 10 days prior to closing?
yes, that would be wonderful.
So I would check it and then hold it, lord it over the lender.
Yeah. So that's certainly a possibility. Okay. How about that? One page down already off the 6. We're on a roll. We're on a roll. Yeah. Okay. Oh, yeah. No, we're good. We're good. By the way, just as people have been, if there's a question in the moment, ask it in the moment. Don't try to save it and try to get to it later, no matter what it is. Yes. What? It's in .loop now. It's in .loop now. And it's been approved. It's across the board. I've had a number of agents tell me that they've seen it come to them, and they've seen it there. So
Total banker.
we were a little behind, because we wanted to get it right, get everything, the right check boxes done and all that kind of stuff. So, okay, so on page 2, there was a little changing in the closing and possession. There used to be a lot of different words and things. We tried to simplify that. You got closing and there's the wording behind that. This came up yesterday in a transaction, and so we'll see how that comes out. But closing is upon delivery for recording of all the documents, and it is when the money has been received by the closing agency, whether that's Wasker or whatever closing company that it goes into their account. So you have to have an understanding of that. What we had was somebody said, well, we're doing our final walkthrough. The sellers have told me they're not coming back. We closed and signed tonight. The money is coming first thing in the morning. Here's your keys. They started moving in. Guess who showed up the next morning to clean out their refrigerator? The sellers. And they are hot. They are furious because there are people carrying stuff in the house and doing all stuff. And the sellers don't have a dime. They call and go, is this officially closed? And Wasker went, no, we haven't got the bank credit yet. So that'll be a fun explanation that I get to go through. So anyway, just have an awareness of that. If you give keys, you have taken the responsibility of giving them access. The second they have keys, they can walk in the door. The second, because you had given them that permission by giving them keys. You better trust the hell out of them if you give them keys prior to closing and tell them, don't you dare walk in that door. Because now you're putting your license in their hands. And I'm not joking. I'm serious. That's a huge offense when you give somebody access to a property. That's both illegal and unethical. So it cleans both of those. All right. Big thing that we did was an included property, and you can see we took out that run-on sentence with thing after thing after thing in a single sentence, and you're trying to figure it all out. And we put it in this format. I think the format came from Arizona or someplace, a purchase agreement that I pulled up and found. And I saw that and I'm like, holy moly, that's awesome. So it's very distinct, very out there, I mean, you could line through if you needed to, if you wanted to line through an initial something that wasn't going to be included. So it has information, and we tried to reword some things to make it more timely. So when we talked about that we added remotes to 3 or 4 different things, because that's a thing now. So just, make sure, the brackets for television and audio, just so that, if there's something screwed into the wall, that's going to stay. If it's a TV and you take it off the brackets, okay, but the brackets have to stay unless you want to completely rip the wall and make it perfect again. All right?
How do you define built-in sound system?
Huh?
How do you define the built-in sound system?
Attached stuff that's,
A component that's got a wire attached to it going to a wall with the,
no, unscrew the wire. Yeah.
so the speakers at the other end would be unscrewable.
The speaker, if they're built into the wall, built into the seating, sure. If they are bracketed, then you have to leave the bracket
That's the
or
way I would have looked at it.
or talk to somebody about what they're going to do, because a lot of times, the speakers, the brackets are specifically designed for them.
So that line just kind of threw me a little bit.
Okay.
I think
What if buyer doesn't want it? Like, if the buyer doesn't want, brackets to stay?
Well, then I think they would cross it off or something. I keep forgetting to repeat the question.
Well, that's when you'd use excluded property.
Yeah, you can. the excluded property is what's gonna stay, but if it's in the included list, I would suggest lining through and initialing that so that, you know, you state that you as a buyer don't want it. So I apologize to those online. I keep forgetting to repeat the question. So hopefully you're picking some of that up on the microphones in the room.
You got multiple pages.
I do. Sooner or later, I'll remember one. So just go through that and you can see it's fairly detailed. We went over each one of those. We tried to make sure that they were clear in what was included or not included. We tried to do all of that. So just some things, I mean, like the outdoor building and shed, you know, at least it draws attention to it so that, you know, it's like, hey, that's going to stay. It was like, well, it's not attached. It's still there. Okay. So, you know, it's going to stay unless you say that you're excluding that.
We have a question online from Don.
Yes, Don.
So, you're saying that the item has to be physically attached to the structure, not necessarily plugged into a wall or plugged in via a cable line or whatever. That's not considered attached to the house?
The wire is like if I've got my receiver sitting on a shelf on the floor and it's plugged into a cable and a plug-in, that's not attached.
Okay, so physically
All right.
attached to the structure itself. Okay.
It would have to be bracketed to the structure and then it's, you know, you leave the bracket. So the thing that happens here is when you're writing an offer or you're accepting an offer, you know, just gain some clarity. If you've got a garage and somebody has, you know, like shelves, you know, those amazing shelves in the garage and stuff, and they got screws in, you know, holding it to the wall so it won't tip over. But the sellers may be thinking, well, I built that. That's my shelf. I'm taking it. So ask the doggone question. Make sure that there's clarity to the issue. I mean, there's some that are absolutely, you walk in, you're like, yeah, that's staying, you know, but you probably should know. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
Jacqueline has a question online.
Yes, Jacqueline. You have to hit your mute button.
Hi, you can hear me. I was hitting it in the wrong spot. Okay, so the three biggest ones that I see come up are window treatments, which I see you've shortened. It doesn't specifically say like blinds, curtains. Is everybody in agreement on what a window treatment is? Because I still have clients not sure if that includes their curtains.
Yeah, if it's a treatment on the window, whether it's blinds, whether it's curtains, anything that is on or around the window is going to stay unless you reserve it.
So curtains reserved. Okay. And then the thermostats and doorbells, just to clarify, that covers the Nest and, you know, the fancy ones.
Yes,
So they're staying
yes.
without
Unless,
additional writing.
unless you put them on excluded items, they're staying. They are an integral part of the property.
Yep. And
Okay.
security would also include like I'm thinking the newer stuff, like, oh, you know, the tablet systems and stuff.
Employee stay.
I mean, it has to be an integral part of the house. I mean, like you have cameras outside, you may have to take the camera and leave the bracket. Or, you know, that's another one. It's like, we're not going to clarify every situation with these 14 lines. You've got to make sure you understand, you
There are
know.
other positions, if you write in everything.
Yeah, you got to, I mean, yeah, make sure. Make sure if it's got some of that stuff, then write it in, write it down, talk about it. Make sure everybody's on the same page. You know, so, but yeah, if it's a Nest thermostat and it doesn't say excluded, you get a Nest thermostat. That's how it works. Okay. Under homeowners associations, there is an HOA addendum that was put as a newer addendum that was put out last year. So make sure you're seeing that, using that when you're dealing with homeowners associations. So that you're covered and your people, I can't tell you how many times we've had somebody, and there's an association and there's covenants and there's everything else, and they don't write a thing in. There's nothing. It was like, if you don't, then you don't get the opportunity to approve the covenants and read through the documents and make sure that the articles of incorporation, make sure that the financial liquidity of the association is in good shape. And, you know, you get none of that. There's just not much to work with. So make sure of that. Okay, another big change. There is not a septic addendum anymore. Okay, no septic addendum. The base information of a septic is on the seller's disclosure. Huh?
Skip page 4, page 3.
I missed page 3. Oh my God. Boy, I thought I was moving right along too. I thought, damn, look at me go. All right, I'll hurry through this one. So, okay, anyway, thank you. I appreciate that. Page 3. So the inspections of property, you have to understand that there is no inspection that you're going to do that's going to take the place of any buyer lender requirements. Okay, that's the buyer's lender, whether it's a program, whether it's FHA or VA or USDA or some of the other benefit programs that they have for first-time home buyers and you know, all the different ones that are out there. If they require an inspection, whatever that inspection finds has to be dealt with. Okay, so your inspection and signing off, we don't need a thing on this property. The mortgage part is still in play. My recommendation is always that if you're dealing with a mortgage that has some kind of inspection as part of the appraisal process, or in some cases, actually, like the city inspector comes out and takes a look. If you're dealing with that, defer your agreements with the buyer about what's going to be done inspection wise until you get that back. So just write it in there. It's like, you know, we will respond to this as soon as we know what the lender requires. If they don't like it, they'll say so. But otherwise, you're jeopardizing your seller twice. You know, you have the first, you have the inspection. They're like, okay, yeah, we'll take care of that, and we'll get that done and everything. And then the lender goes out, and then you get 2 or 3 more things. And you're like, here we are again. So just think that through. Okay. My favorite one, the inspection process. Not dramatically changed, except for we never had anything. What happens when the seller doesn't respond off the inspection request? It was never in there. And so if the seller didn't respond, you're like, what are we going to do? We created that. So if the seller fails to notify the buyer within the specified time, then it shall be deemed a rejection of the buyer's request if the seller doesn't respond. So it keeps your time frame, your numbers intact, so you can require a response from the seller, or you have the ability to walk away. Okay. The other one in 2 and 3, we went through this whole thing of as is. The seller selling as is, the buyer's buying as is, but we've never defined as is. Okay. So what we did was we created a second as is. So you do the as is. I've done all the inspections I want to do. I'm buying the thing the way it is. It's mine. That's it. Or as a buyer who walks in and you're like, I think the property looks pretty good. I know the seller's not willing to do anything. They said so in the listing. You know, it's being sold as is. So what we're going to do is we're going to accept that. We're going to take it as is, but we want to do an inspection to make sure that it's not something we can't handle. That's called defining as is. And it gives the buyer the option of, based on what they find, they have the ability to walk away. Okay. Because that was a huge thing. And so we wanted to solve that problem. People say, well, everybody's gonna just check that one because they can just walk away. It's like, well, but every seller doesn't automatically say their house is being sold as is. So that's what this is for, okay? It's for the as is. Yeah. So is there any questions about inspections? I know that's a crazy spot. It's still there. Most of the first part is the same. We're still gonna have the buyers that, you know, the agent says, well, just write a whole bunch of stuff down. And then when they don't agree to put batteries in the doorbell, then you can say, I don't want it, you know, so yes, Neil.
So just to clarify, when we do the inspections, request items, we need to put a time, right, when we want to hear back.
There's a time built into the inspection clause. When the buyer has so much time, or the seller has so much time to respond the first time, the buyers have so much time to respond back. So yeah, there's time frames built into the inspection clause. Yes.
On line 120, you said something about what required by the buyer's lender. You're obviously just talking about the appraisal process.
Well, no, I mean, like FHA, the appraisal process includes an inspection. USDA does, a NFC has a city inspector come out. So yeah.
They're not encouraging us to say, hey, let's wait to see what, I mean, because the inspection and the appraisal are going to come at two completely different times. I always negotiate the inspections as is, and then if there are lender asks, then we'll tend to that. I don't want to elongate it.
Well, it's totally, everybody gets to do it the way they want. I dislike having two separate inspections. You know, if it's an FHA, then I would at least say, we're willing to fix these things unless. Okay. Yeah. So it's just like, I don't want to commit to fixing all this stuff that the buyer has, and then the lender has this. And now the buyer's like, well, I can't get financing if you don't do that, but I've already promised to do all this. And so I'm kind of hamstrung as a seller. Okay. Yeah.
Prevails on some of these conflicts with these dates, because before, let's say I didn't get a response, I've got to give them 5 days notice to respond before declaring anything.
There's nothing that says 5 days except for the abstract and the financing.
No, it's calling to perform.
3 days.
Yes, 3 days.
On the mortgage section,
In the mortgage sections, you can give 5 days notice.
If they don't have final loan commitment, so that only applies to the loan commitment.
Correct.
okay.
Unless you're
That-
working with me, then I'll.
That, I'm sorry, yes.
Let's say we have a couple questions online too, once we get there.
Okay, go ahead. Let's do those real quick.
Don had the first question.
No, I think Mike got answered with some of the other ones when he was talking, so I'm good.
Okay, thank
And then
you.
Michelle. Michelle Holder.
Michelle.
She just likes to raise her hand and not.
She's drinking whiskey.
Okay.
That's what.
So Lance, if you check box 3, that the buyer is buying it in as is condition and they have their inspection and they realize, oh, I'm
Yeah,
not gonna buy this.
right.
You do not have to do an inspection addendum
No,
to have it, although you could.
You
I
could.
suppose that's optional,
I mean,
but if
you-
you're just like, I want to run.
yeah,
You do the purchase agreement release.
correct. Yep. And it's like, you know, so many days after final acceptance, the same, you got a time frame and you have to be within that time frame. You can't wait until and then come back. So, but if you find, I mean, you go in and go, holy crap, I'm gonna have to have, you know, a new electrical box. There's no way I'm buying this as is. And so you certainly may say to the seller, hey, we found this. And so that's way too much. And the seller and the listing agent might go, we didn't realize that. Sure, we can take care of that. You still want to go? Yeah. So I think there's always the opportunity to try. Yes, ma'am.
We talked about the importance of the seller disclosure.
Oh, yes.
As is.
Yeah, here's the thing. When we were doing this and somebody buys as is and they don't they don't do an inspection, there's a huge liability that lays with the seller. Okay, there's a reason that every foreclosure company out there insists that you get a 10-day inspection period. It's not because they're being nice guys. Okay, the reason they do that is because they pass the liability off to the buyer. That's what that's for. That's what this is for. The seller doing as is says, no, you look. Because what happens is if the buyer comes back, and I've seen this a couple of times, the buyer comes back and they start perusing the seller's disclosure and going, well, you had to have known about this. That's why you're selling it as is. You know, you didn't say anything about this in your seller's disclosure. Now, having awareness is that buying it as is does not relieve the seller from telling everything they know in the seller's disclosure. Okay, not the same thing at all. But if the seller does this, says, yes, you have an inspection period, absolutely, they then have dumped off a lot of the liability on the due diligence of the buyer. And so it lessens their liability down the road. So that's another reason that we like that a lot. Okay? Bam. Page 4. Yeah, so the septic system, there's not an addendum anymore. It never made sense because the buyer was filling it out, but they needed the seller's information to be able to fill it out. And then we had buyer's agents that were saying, well, sign the back, where it's like, you're saying, well, the seller is going to do everything. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to put my seller in a situation where I write a blank check, you know, so it didn't make sense the way it came together. So we took that away. We did reflect back on what the code is, because there is a specific code that says you have to do it to have transfer. You have to do the inspection. And there's some time frames if you've done an inspection, and if you've done a pumping, there's time frames to work with. So all of that is in the code. You should rely on septic people and the county sanitarians. They're the ones who you can rely on the correct info. Okay, let's not rely on anybody else. Yes, sir.
There are exemptions to this, correct?
There are certainly exemptions to, we're not going to go through it, just reflect that. Because the silliness is that the exemptions, although we know what they are in most cases, each county sanitarian has a different point of view on what those exemptions are, because we talked to 3 different ones trying to put this, what less officially called the shit show. We actually had poop donuts one day just while we were trying to figure this out. It was donuts made to look like the poop emoji. It was funny as heck. But we that's just part of the process of understanding who is exempt and how. Yes.
Stacia has a question online.
Stacia.
Hey, so
Hey.
what happens when you get to be, a few weeks out from closing, the septic inspection comes back and it needs a new septic?
Yes.
Then you're renegotiating who's paying for that at that time, or?
At that time, there's really not much negotiating because the seller has to fix it.
They have to
seller-
fix it.
The seller, at that point, somebody's going to fix it. I mean, they can try to negotiate and say the buyers accept the responsibility, and you do that sometimes when you buy it wholesale, reduce the price like crazy. It's like, yeah, I'll take that. But the seller cannot transfer that property without it being repaired.
Okay, so it's the seller's responsibility to make sure the septic is in good working condition.
Well, yeah, otherwise they can't transfer it. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. And like I said, there's exemptions, foreclosures or exemptions. There's estates, that kind of stuff. Quickly on that, if you get a foreclosure maybe, but on estates, that kind of thing, I myself I tell the estate, do the inspection. because you might find out that it's good. And then you can transfer the property and everybody knows it's good and they pay real money for it. If you say I'm exempt, I'm not doing it, I immediately think, okay, I got to get this for 20,000 less because I may have to put a new system in. So I'd rather spend, what is it now? $500, $750 maybe if they dig it, whatever it is. I'd rather spend that and know up front. And then you've got it and say, hey, then you're negotiating with knowledge. Okay, so that's just my own personal thing. Yes, Jacqueline.
Yes, on the septic, I think I'm still a little unclear if it comes back, a week before closing and it needs a whole new system and the seller had no idea. What if you can't get blood from a turnip? What if the seller doesn't have the money to do it and yet everything else in the contract? I mean, it sounds like the contract has to make them. I don't know. It seems ambiguous.
They can't sell without.
Right.
They-
But then they could come and say, well, I would have sold it for 20,000 more to help cover my costs because I don't have the money.
Maybe they should have had it inspected when they listed it then.
So as a listing agent, it seems like this really should be something we make sure gets done before we list the home.
Absolutely. It's coming. That train is coming. You might as well know about it up front. It's like Michelle and I, years ago, she had the idea of doing pre-inspection everything. And I still agree with that. And the septic tank is the same thing. Yes.
On that pre-inspection, you were mentioning about the liability from the seller. If we are pre-inspecting, or is there any additional liability that we?
Okay, the question is, if we are pre-inspecting, is there any additional liability? No. When you pre-inspect, when you like in the septic or overall? Okay, overall, when you pre-inspect, you are making information part of the seller's disclosure and giving it to them to look at. They are making an offer based on that information to buy it.
So what if they waive inspection based on that inspection?
I'm sorry?
If they waive inspection based.
That is their decision. You never, ever, ever, ever suggest that they do that. Okay? Michelle, do you want to speak to that at all? You've been doing it for years now.
I think it's important that the seller's disclosure is the seller's disclosure, but the pre-inspection report is what the inspector says, and it may not have been knowledge the other time to.
Yeah,
To together.
yes. Yeah, you have to.
Make sure that they know. Like they see inspection report right now, the court provided.
Speak into the microphone. So-
I'm not sure that's true, but not for the ones who like. So that was,
by legal suggestion from Paul to make sure that they understand there's all of those documents available.
And then anything you find on the pre-inspection, you add your seller's disclosure, you cover.
I don't, because sometimes if a seller fills out, like Anthony fills out the seller's disclosure, we're sitting down, he decides to list me, smart. So he fills out the seller's disclosure, but if the pre-inspection is afterwards, that's additional knowledge that he did not know. We do not go back and do the seller's disclosure, but we have to do together.
Even though you
Now-
have knowledge now.
Correct.
Yeah, you,
Confusing.
What's that?
That's kind of confusing, isn't it?
I don't think so, because it says, this is what the seller knows, this is what the inspector says, and on the seller's disclosure, it says, refer to that document.
Oh, okay.
yeah, so
Tie
be,
it together,
Yeah.
like, because what the seller only knows what the seller knows, it wasn't just up in the attic, but the inspector was. So here's what I know, refer to what the inspector says.
You know when you.
I do.
okay, let's not go off in a full pre-inspection thing. I did open the door, I apologize. But yeah, we can have a class on pre-inspection sometime because it is amazing what it does to your business, amazing what it does for your sellers. So we certainly can do that. Michelle has already volunteered to teach that. So it's going to be awesome. Okay. So anyway, with that, so private, the other thing that we put in there is that who is going to, oh, yes.
Sorry, it is not accepted question. So if we tell our sellers to get it pre-inspected, how long is that good for?
It's good for either 2 or 3 years.
Oh, okay, so.
Yeah, the inspection time frame for everybody out there was questioned. And it's like, an inspection is 2 years, a pump is 3. I think that's right. Hope that's right. So I'm like, ugh. So, okay, the other thing we did is who is going to schedule it and pay for it? Because there's always that, you know, it's like, oh, I don't know. It's like, you know, so you get into some situations where the buyer's like, no, I'll schedule it. I'll schedule it and I'll pay for it. I want to do an inspection. So, you can do that also. But it's clear that there's an option. Either party can do that rather than, you know, the buyer going, okay, is the seller going to do, when's the seller going to do this? You know, so we put that in. Rental property, I just did that. I just highlighted that because when you sell a rental, there is a rental addendum that fits this scenario. And so you should fill that out. It handles all those things that are supposed to be handled. You know, like deposits, rent, leases, timeframes, all those things. So it's a great reminder. Just think rental addendum and it will take care of you. Okay? Then let's see, additional provisions. We typed in really small because we didn't want to use up a bunch of lines to put the regulatory compliance fee in. So the insurance is basically the same. We did in there in the abstract and title, we put in there that either party can rescind the agreement if you're not getting clear title. Okay, so you can give 5 days notice. The buyer can do it, or the seller can do it if the seller has made effort to clear and they've not been able to. The seller can't just go, yeah, man, sorry, can't, you know, and they haven't even given their abstract in. You know, they can't do that. They have to, it's in here, it says, unless they've made a reasonable effort to produce marketable title. So the seller can't do it willy-nilly, but the buyer has the option. If you're not clearing title, be like, dude, I gotta go. So you got 5 days. Okay? Look at this fly through. Calculating time periods in this agreement. Read it. Okay, just read it. Yeah, it's simple if you think about it. A business day starts at midnight and goes to 11:59 p.m. Okay? Midnight, 12:59 p.m. That's the day. There's no like, well, business was at 5 o'clock then, business day. It's not business hours. It's a business day. All right. So it's a full 24-hour period each time. And it's always the day after an agreement. The day after. Okay. Dispute resolution, you know what? Get that initial. It works. On page 6, the only thing we really pushed in there, tried to make it clear and stuff. 2 things I want to draw out. One, where it says buyer and seller's initials, we put that in there because in this day and age, what is happening is that people are getting the form on dot loop and they're going sign, initial, done. Okay? Here, they're initialing where it says seek legal advice if needed. Okay? That was another attorney's suggestion. It's like, don't just roll by all that. They need to know that they have the option to do that and they initial close to that. And so there you go. The other thing is if you have an addendum, for goodness sake, please check that attached addendum. Well, I had a deal 2 years ago now where NFC, they put an addendum in there about how the commission was going to get paid. It was all set up and it was done correctly. Everything was there and they sent it in to them. They didn't check the box. So NFC signed it, sent it back. They're like, where's the addendum? They're like, they didn't have an addendum with the purchase agreement. That was the separate document. They didn't sign that. You have an accepted purchase agreement. Agent didn't get paid the dime.
So Lance, we don't have to write in what those addendums are anymore? Just on the current one, doesn't it have a line where you can write in?
You can certainly,
You know, like.
well, you can write in like on additional provisions. You can press see addendum.
Doesn't it have see attached addendums and then there was a line like.
Yeah, you can.
So we don't have to write them in.
No, you don't have
check
to.
the box?
No, you
Okay.
just make sure you check the box. I recommend that in additional provisions, you might write in, see addendum such and such.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Yes.
Do we have a good way to do this and navigate around lenders that don't want to see personal property on the first agreement? So you write on an addendum.
No, if you got personal property, then you do a bill of sale. It's in dot loop, it's sitting there, it is separate from the purchase agreement.
Like kitchen appliances.
Well, most kitchen appliances, the lenders don't have a problem anymore. They're common. They washer and dryer, yes.
I've always done.
Yeah, I mean, you're keeping the garden tractor in the garage. You probably shouldn't put that on the purchase agreement. And the thing is like, well, you know, put it on an addendum and then just don't show it to me and stuff. No, I'm not gonna be part of committing fraud. That's what it is. I mean, let's be honest with each other. It's just fraudulent activity that you're participating in. Don't do it. Don't do it. Put it on a bill of sale, have them both sign it. It's an agreement between buyer and seller, done. Easy. Okay? Purchase agreement, how about that? On the lead-based paint, the reason we printed this one out, because everybody knows the lead-based paint, we wanted to draw that there isn't initials at the top when you first started. We used to always initial. There is not now. See, it says check below. If you want to initial, I don't care. You're welcome to do so, but it's just check box. And then the reason we showed you this one is that this is for a lease. You know that leases require lead-based paint disclosure. Okay, if you're going to be listing rentals, you might want to include that. Yes, sir.
Why is our compliance department kicking it back to us if they're making us initial benefit?
I'm sorry, what?
Why is our compliance department kicking us back to us saying we need to initial, both parties have to initial in those check boxes?
At the top?
All, really? A, item A, item B, they're making us initial, both parties, not check boxes.
No, but apparently they haven't been communicated with.
Every time. we get-
That's the first time I've heard that. So I'll make sure that is it. Okay? This is the newest form that was created by HUD. So, all right? Huh?
It's not for purchase.
That's the exact same thing, only I wanted to show you that there's a lease. So it's the exact same form, but it says, instead of buyer and seller, it says lessee and lessor. But yeah, in dot loop is all the correct form. Okay, buyer appointed agency. If you need to take a break, feel free, it's okay. You know, but we're not gonna stop because I just want to get all this in. In the buyer appointed agency, and you'll see it in the seller appointed agency also, is at the top, when RE/MAX Concepts agents, designated group, or team. Everybody knows that January 1st, teams are now recognized in the state of Iowa. They are defined and recognized. So now, because they are defined and recognized, you can probably be sued. Okay, because now you're a recognized entity. So here's the deal with this. And the reason that we put that in there and did these different things is that if you're a team, you can't get a buyer and have your teammate write the offer and have it not be dual. No. Don't do that. Don't do that.
Have it not be.
Uh,
full? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, if you're a team, you are sharing information back and forth. You have team meetings and you talk about listings and maybe we should lower the price and this or that. And how's that buyer going? Well, I got him, showed him a couple of houses, not sure. You're sharing information as a team. You can't then split up and be different appointed agents. You're one appointed agent. You're a team. If you're going to have somebody write an offer on your listing, if you want some separation, fine, it's fine. But you're going to be a dual agent in that. Yes, sir.
You know, slightly off topic there, is the state gonna recognize, get a team of license, and then is DMAAR gonna recognize?
DMAR will not recognize teams. There's no reason to.
Well, state
The state recognizes teams.
doesn't give them a team license number.
No. No, not yet. Where we're at with the team stuff is that the legislature put it all together. Here's a definition of teams. Here's all that kind of stuff. And then they did all the advertising stuff that's gonna be, and they did all of that. And they said, the commission is gonna make a whole bunch of rules for you to follow. And then the governor said, okay, we're gonna stop everything while we combine 36 different entities into 17, I think it is. So they're combining all of these things. And so the commission is going to be up underneath another system, one more layer of bureaucracy that we get to play with. But they're doing that. And because of that, the governor in her edict or whatever it was said, okay, no more rulemaking during this period. So there are no rules other than you're a team. This says you're a team, you're a team. Okay? So the rule is not the state of Iowa telling you to do that. The rule is concepts telling you to do that. Dual is how we're going to do business.
So dual is only when MoCo writes an offer on a
On
team listing.
a listing, yeah.
If MoCo writes an offer on Shane's.
Oh, no.
and he is not.
Oh, no, not at all. Not at all. Not at all. It's just when you have two people, because it just makes sense that you talk to each other, you follow up, you talk about listings, sales, buyers, sellers, process. You do all of that as a team. You can't then separate that out. Okay, yes.
Does that mean for the appointed agents, it needs to say the team name or you still?
Right now, we don't have the ruling on that. What we've seen most teams do, I think you guys do, where you put the team lead and the agent. So you put those two together. Okay?
So just keep that.
Yeah, you can do that. That then has the team lead person's on there, but just an awareness that everybody on the team is part of that. Okay? There are some I think there's a team or two in the company and in multiple other places that there is an attachment with the seller's or the disclosures, agency disclosures, and it lists every team member and it's attached and given. Okay? So with that too, affiliated business arrangement, we've shrunk that down and put those businesses in there that we either highlight, market, or are part of the company. Okay, so that's why those are in there. Yes, sir.
What's a designated group example?
That was wording that was brought in off of another one. I think the designated group is more about just saying it's like another team. It's a different way of referring to it. So we included that so that it had the different examples of anything you want to call yourself. You need to sign up that way.
Was that when we had individual agents who were maybe working for a builder or a subdivision that weren't a team, but they were working as a?
Could be, and it's a whole can of worms. Understand that as soon as you do an open house for somebody else and they're listing, and then it just gets all blown up. So I mean, if you want to get down right to the gnat, it's all kinds of stuff that's out there. We operate a little bit in a bubble in Des Moines. Other places, there's all kinds of rules about having an open house for somebody other than your own listing, or somebody from your own team doing your listing, somebody else doing the open house, then they gain some knowledge, that kind of thing. So it gets really crazy. So we're not going there yet. Yes, sir.
So it's affiliates on the other, can we write in the companies that we own that might be associated with?
Yeah, when you read affiliates, it's anybody that you have an ownership interest in that you might recommend to them to you. So yes, that's the reason we put other. Thanks for bringing that up. We put other in that so that if you then have a service, you have a lawn mowing service, and you might recommend that they use you, you need to put that in there. Okay. Cool. So buyer and seller, basically the same thing. I don't think there's anything else we have to dig into as far as that goes. So let's go to unrepresented seller professional fee. We took this from a 2-page to a 1-page, basically because the second page was reiterating what was on the first page again. So we shrunk it down. We made sure people that you understand this, the duties to all parties, the duties to clients. It makes sure that it says no agency representation, and then it has a description and what the commission's going to be, and then it states again that the agency status. So we just want some real clarity that if you're working with an unrepresented seller, say it's a sale by owner, and you want to get paid, but you send this to them, say, listen, I'm not representing you. Now, you can do ministerial tasks for those people. You can help them out a little bit. You cannot do anything that is realtor license required for an unrepresented seller, because then you put them in that loop. So don't do any of that, okay? But you can do ministerial stuff for them. It's like, well, I don't even have I don't even know what a seller's disclosure is. Let me get you one, let me get you one. So you can do ministerial tasks, but you can't do anything else. One thing too, while I got a nice group here, both online and here, is if you're doing a for sale by owner, don't do a dual agency just automatically. Don't do that. There's a lot of people do that and they're like, well, it just makes it easier and stuff. No, it doubles your liability. Do you understand that? It doubles your liability. And you become a dual agent, which makes your liability even more. And you're working with somebody who really doesn't want you to work for them. That's why they're listing for sale by owner. So it's like, oh, well, make my numbers look better. Nobody cares about your numbers. It's not a big deal. Stop it. You are gaining liability. If you're going to do a dual agent, for God's sake, charge them commission. Like do a 5% or something, get a little something out of them so you can pay for your insurance claim. Okay. So anyway, that's the unrepresented seller. Any questions about that? I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Yes.
Would not show of any help.
No, not if it's a, so using our form, as Michelle just asked, is acceptable. It's just a form. They fill it, they do all that stuff. You're not signing off on anything. It's just, you're giving them the opportunity to communicate. We've done with buyers, we're like, well, here's a purchase agreement, feel free to fill it out or whatever. You can do that. Ministerial, you just can't advise them, you can't work with them, you can't do any of those things. But if they're just really in a bind, you can go online and print out a state form. Ours only has a few things extra on it. So yes, we do. I heard the ring. Yes, Jacqueline.
Hi, under the appointed agency, under the backside, the second page, the dual agency disclosure, it says you may want to be shown a property which is listed by a RE/MAX Concepts agent, but we can't show the property unless both the buyer and the seller have provided a written consent for dual agency. Does that mean I can't show another RE/MAX Concepts property without this?
No, it means you can't show your listing unless
okay, I hoped that's what you'd say. I might have read that.
The little checkbox that's there. And by the way, on the agency forms, like we auto check consent on both places, because surprisingly, nobody here, of course, but other agents sometimes forget to do that. So nobody here, but we auto check consent, and then it's radio button, so you can uncheck that if you want to. Mortgage commitment 5-day notice. The old one had it was a 5-day notice, and then it said within and a blank for number of days. So it was like, it's a 5-day notice, probably should say 5 days. So that's the only thing we did there. You just cleared that up so somebody didn't give a 5-day notice and give 3 days, as part of the notice. Make any sense? Okay. Next one is the hold harmless agreement. We found this one in Okoboji and found it and really liked it a lot. We're going to put this in the buyer's packet. The buyer's for you to have every time. It would be my personal recommendation that you have people sign off, you read through, understand it, and you're able to give them the content of it. But basically it talks about mold, it talks about radon, it talks about inspectors. It does cover the spot where we've all had where, well, here's 3 different or 4 different inspectors that I've worked with and they do pretty good. And it's like, can you just call one and set up an appointment? You can do that. But in here, it says, if you do that, you don't have any excess liability because.
We have sex offenders. Good.
Yeah, so yeah, and the questions on the bottom are questions we can't answer. Okay? We can't answer those questions. When they want to know, we're the school district, when they want to know all these different things, you need to push that off. There's maps in every school district around. There's like maps. Most of them have where you can type the address and they tell you that it's in the school district or not. There's, about the specific school that your child would attend. I know we ran up in Southeast Polk, we ran up against that because you'd be like 1 block away from the elementary school, but it was full. So you went to the one that was miles away. All right. So, so that's the reasoning behind that. Certainly sex offenders and zoning and that none of that is within your scope. You don't have the ability you don't have the knowledge. Your license does not include that knowledge. When you do impart that knowledge on somebody, you take liability. Okay? So just have it. That's just a good form. It covers your butt and it covers mine because if your butt gets uncovered, then it comes straight to mine. So yeah, comes to the bigger butt. So, okay. Listing agreement. We did a few changes in the listing agreement just to make it better. We in the commission, we put a listing side commission, a buyer's side commission, and then a total commission. Because it gets misunderstood. We want both parties to understand. This is how much is in the listing. The seller then decides how much. The seller decides how much commission they're going to pay the buyer. I wanted to make sure I said that. The seller decides how much they're going to pay the buyer. Okay? You don't. You don't. You don't have the ability.
Buyer's agent?
The buyer's agent. Yes. Yeah. You don't have the ability to make that decision. You can't go to the seller like we used to and go, hey, well, we charge 7 and give 3.5 to the buyer's agent. That's absolutely no way can you do that now. No, don't do it. Okay. There are no splits. We have listing commission paid to the listing brokerage. We have buyer's commission paid to the buyer's brokerage. And the seller, through talking with you, decides how much that is. You negotiate that. Yes, ma'am. You have that look on your face. I know you're like, wait a minute.
They decide.
The seller is the one who decides what the buyer gets paid. The buyer's agent gets paid. Sure.
Buyer's agent.
You negotiate whatever you want for the listing. Sure. Yeah. Huh? Well, negotiating is sometimes this is how much I charge. I mean, that's okay.
Whatever you want.
No, when they're hiring you, they need to know how much you're going to charge them. And they can say, oh, I don't think I want to pay that. And you can say, okay, well, I'll get my set.
they can still say, what do you charge? And then we can say. what we
They
charge.
say, you know, as a listing agent, I charge this much. And here's the value I bring to the table.
So
Okay.
are you saying that the brokers no longer agree how they're gonna split?
Absolutely no. No, it's against the law. Has been for a while. It's against the law to split.
Well, that is not true, because you can write another broker a letter and tell him how you're gonna.
If
split.
you want to do an adverse letter, yes, you can tell them, I'm going to pay you this much. Yes, that's an adverse letter. But we cannot generally agree amongst brokers how much we're going to do.
Right, on the total commission.
Right.
But for years, we've agreed how we're gonna split.
We don't.
No.
No,
Okay.
no,
So
there is none.
So broker,
As long as you're not paying like the 6%.
so all the commission goes to a broker at closing and then you get a check a week later, is that not falling in line with that? Most state brokerages, they put a check at closing now, but there are still some, like, they told us that all the commissions like Iowa Realty, they go to Iowa.
Iowa Realty takes the commission. It's like what happens at closing to commissions. Iowa Realty, and I don't know if there's some others. Anyway, at closing, they take the whole commission amount and then they disperse the correct amount to the buyer's company. And that's just a control thing. I think it's a control thing. I think it also is that their average bank balance stays higher and they get more money off of interest, but that's just a guess. So, yeah, I don't know who it was the other day. It was over a week and they had not gotten, the commission yet. And then they mailed it. Okay. So they mailed the check. They mailed it to the old address. And so then it had to come back in the mail. And then they mailed it to the new address. So anyway, yeah, so we as a company, we're fairly progressive. We were one of the very first companies to actually split the commission into the two sides. And I said split, I should have said split, but we divide it at closing and give the amount that's going to the buyer's brokerage and the amount that's going to our brokerage. We do that at closing table. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
Realizing your DMAAR forms, but I'm going to ask you about an internal form.
An internal form, yes.
Estimate of proceeds.
Yes,
And maybe it's already been updated and I haven't noticed or paid attention.
I can't imagine that.
Could we have the split for listing commission, buyer's agent commission on that form? Because I've started, I've updated, do you need to sneeze?
No,
Oh.
no, I'm rapt attention. That's, yeah.
So I started, in my presentation view, I have an estimate of proceeds.
Yeah.
And, I don't really, if I'm in person, I
Yeah.
say it the same as if I do it on a recording
Sure.
to them. My fee is 3%.
Yes,
And this is what will pay the buyer's agent. I recommend that you pay them 3%.
Yeah.
So your listing doesn't get blackballed, blah, blah, blah. Here's all
yeah,
the
be
reasons
careful
why.
how you say
Well,
that.
and I don't usually say the word
Yeah.
blackballed, but
Yeah.
for-
That is just because that's part of both the lawsuits, but go ahead. Both the national lawsuits talk about that we coerce the seller into paying a certain amount. And so that's why I said.
Well, I am giving them the recommendation to do the 3% though. Because if they do less, they need to be aware of what's going to happen.
Well, if they do less, there are, the rules are changing where, it's one of the rules now is that we can't decide what house we're going to show based on the commission we receive. That is against the rules now. That's part of the agreement that we did with the Department of Justice that they tried to renege on. But that's part of that is that but anyway, go ahead with your, but yeah,
That split out on mine, it would be nice if it were split out on that.
that's a great idea.
Which would
And
also-
I'm sure that Michelle just took and noted that so that she can tell us.
Looking at it, and I'll send it to the printer.
Okay, all right.
Future reference.
Yes. So now that's probably a good thing. Is it, because we did make sure we did it on the listing side. Yes, sir.
On the admin fee, I know on the buyers, you have different prices. Why on the listing side is giving out different prices on the admin fee?
just because we do an admin fee, blank, period. That there's no service that you can do that increases the admin fee. The services you provide are the commission you receive.
I mean, we could say with marketing, the additional marketing thing, we could put it on there.
You can, if you want to add a marketing fee someplace, feel free. But the administration fee is for us, and that's what we do, and we define what we do. And there's nothing in that you do that you could say, this is what we do. So those two have been separated. On the buyer side, yes, because there's all kinds of things that you can do that enhance that. But on the seller side, if you want to include a marketing fee, or you want to say the reason I charge this is because of that, that's totally fine. But as far as fees, we as a company made the decision that there would be no additional fee available. Okay. So we have that. We put effective date on the termination protection. We put the effective listing date so that you don't get into the scenario where, the person, they're not ready until Tuesday because they need the whole weekend to get ready, and they'll be ready on Tuesday, but you're there and you're ready to sign and everything. And so we took away that date of signature being the date, because then you were stuck with clear cooperation with 1 business day to get it turned in and all that stuff. So we put the effective date on there so that if it's 3-4 days away and you're getting the signature, you're still okay. All right, the effective date.
Did you take, it used to say something about it can't have to be within 7 days of signature?
Yeah, we didn't continue that. That's kind of a rule of thumb. 7, in the listing, we used to have where it had to be within 7 days. That's because the way it was set up required that. The way we have it set up now, you get to a point where if you get a signature and you don't get it turned in a fairly timely manner, you're going to be violating clear cooperation. The effective date gives you a little bit of frame in there to work with, but there's a point. We kind of picked 7 days, but we picked that out of the air. It didn't have any bearing on anything.
So how many days after termination?
No, it's not that. The termination thing, that's up to you. How many days after that? Some people do 90 days, some people do 120, some go up to 180. That's kind of up to you and what you feel. In other markets, you can do whatever you want, but if they list with somebody else, you're done anyway. So we don't have that here. Quad Cities, if you cancel or expire a listing and you have a period on it and they list with somebody else, you're out. So yeah, it's a different world up there. But anyway, that aside, the biggest thing we did was because of the lawsuit, the slip and fall lawsuit that was against Iowa Realty. Even though Iowa Realty was found not guilty, the commentary that the Supreme Court included in that basically said, had the listing agent been present when that happened, it would have been the brokerage's fault. Okay, so what we did was we got an indemnification. Now, there is, just so you know, there is a law going through right now. It is through the House of Representatives and it is to the Senate floor for debate, but that has to do with that indemnification. It has to do with us not accepting responsibility. There's also an attorney's response to the state listing form, but it is 2 pages long of the indemnification and all the situations and everything. And Jody McDougall wrote it, and I would never, ever argue with Jody because she's remarkable. But we decided not to put that in our listing form because then trying to explain that is crazy. So the law should be changed sometime probably up in 1st of January. So this indemnification clause will keep us safe at this point, because you're just not, it's like the seller, it's your house, okay? You maintain it, you take care of it, that kind of stuff. Have an awareness that if you go shovel a path to the house, if you do that, you have taken on the responsibility of that job. If you do a really shitty job shoveling and somebody falls, yes, you're in a bind. Okay, so don't do it if you can keep from it. If you do it, do one hell of a good job. Do it the best it can be done. There's guidelines to what is a good job, and did you make a good effort, and the weather and all that kind of stuff. But
What if you outsource it?
if you outsource it, if somebody else, a third party does it, as long as the third party's been asked by the seller to do it, you're fine.
So, but if I call you to shovel and you're the third party, then
No, it's you.
Okay.
So you need to say, hey, I've got a guy. You can call them and set this up. Let me get you his number or her number or whatever. So step out of the middle. Okay, so you don't have liability. I was making such good headway, and then fine. Page 1, what? Yes. Correct. Yes.
So you have a certain photographer who likes to post his pictures.
Yes. He has been warned twice. He's been warned twice not to do that. So
There's not like a 24-hour rule, like
it's a one business day.
one business.
One business day, yeah. So, yeah, and yeah, there's all the caveats. I mean, like, well, I'm gonna get it signed on Friday, but I can't get it turned in. So that means I don't have to have it in until, late Monday, first thing Tuesday morning, blah, blah, blah. Sure, all that exists. It's all there, and you can use it as much as you want to. People, just so you know, people notice. They notice that, but yeah. Yeah, and that's in there too. It's a thing to discuss with your sellers, because sellers get all excited and it's like, oh, they're taking pictures, and you send them the pictures, go, here's the picture when we put it on the market. And they're like, look at the pictures of my house. I'm putting it on the market and everything. And they do that, and you're like 3 days away from putting it out. That's a problem, because when the seller does that, you then have one business day to get it on the market. Even though the seller did it, it's still a problem. So you have to get it out there. Okay. Addendum and amendment.
Question on that listing, addenda. So what should people be doing, listing agents be doing when they list house for sale, they get 3 offers, and the buyer says, hey, I want to wait till Monday to see how many offers we get rolling in. Legally, it doesn't have to be an addenda stating that stuff. They can't just willy-nilly change the rules right then and there.
If you're like said, the seller is saying, I'm gonna hold that kind of stuff.
Yep.
The seller is in charge anytime. If you publish that they're gonna look at stuff on Friday, and the seller changes their mind, now you have a responsibility to change the publish and call anybody who has shown interest, called you, checked in. So it's a pain in the butt. So you just do the best you can. Yeah, you just do the best you can. But the seller's in charge. But if you advertise that a certain date is going to be, and then nothing happens and that doesn't happen, now you're in trouble because you've advertised and set false expectations and stuff. Then you're in a bind. Okay.
I got a question back on the time on MLS versus county advertising. We might want to make sure our photographers know that.
Yeah, that was her point. Yeah, it was like if photographers take the picture and then start posting it. Yeah, the stagers, anybody, you have to tell those people, do not post that. I'm not listing it until Friday, and it's Tuesday. Okay, you're getting your pictures ready and all that, and they're like, "Oh, I'm helping my agent now." So, no, you're not. You're causing a real problem. So. No. Identifying information is all that needs to be. I mean, it's like, yeah, it's best just, no. Don't try to play with that rule. It'll come back and bite you. Amendment and addendum, it's surprising, but some people believe that these are the same thing. So just have an awareness, these are not the same thing. If an addendum, you are adding something to the agreement in the process, and that in an amendment, you are changing something in the agreement. Generally speaking, if it's all signed and done, from that point on, you're making amendments. Okay, there's an amendment to it, because even if you are adding something to it, you're changing the agreement. So addendum and amendments, and these are just cleaned up a little bit, and they became DMAR forms because they're part of it, and they should be. Are they in the system now, Becca? I'm sorry. They're in now. Okay, so that was a very last minute thing. Okay, I still have a few minutes left, a couple of things to go over that are fun. One, we now have this signing documents, okay? It is instructional on how documents get signed. So if you have an LLC, yeah, I'm sorry. I will go to this one because we have an order and I broke the order, my bad. Purchase agreement cancellation and earnest money. Okay, so everybody knows our purchase agreement says if this happens, you get your earnest money back. Okay, it says that. That does not mean that it's guaranteed. Okay, there are two things that happen. Yes, you've agreed that if this happens, that happens. What happens is like in the inspection clause, and the buyer says, I don't agree. I want my earnest money back, and we get that sent to us, and it says release the earnest money. It's like, no, because the seller didn't sign that the earnest money comes back. And say, well, they did the purchase agreement. I know, but if the seller doesn't sign that, I don't know that that negotiation is closed. Also, in the earnest money, you notice the piece that's above it, that is more important to us and to you and to your clients than the earnest money is. This is a full release of everybody. You, the brokerage, the clients, everybody gets released. We need that signed. That's terribly important. If you have an earnest money dispute, get the top part signed, because at least that releases the house. You can go on and sell it to somebody. Yes, sir.
All right, so on the earnest money release, I believe it's section 543E 13.4.
Yes.
It states that the seller brokerage has to release the earnest money unless the seller is actively suing the buyer to perform.
That's why we get the signature.
But it says that they have to release it unless they're actively, so
Yeah.
it's out of the seller's, even if the seller doesn't sign it, the brokerage has to release it.
No.
Because they're actively suing.
No. That's not.
It says in the code.
Well, there's different parts of the code too. I mean, you can pick one out and say, this is what it says, but it also says that
Actually, 6 reasons
that
you do with the earnest money.
yeah, there's a section in there that says that absent agreement, the earnest money can't be released. And it also says this is one most people don't understand. If I believe as a brokerage that there's an issue, it doesn't say anybody has to file anything. If I have knowledge that somebody is thinking that they're going to file or there's a problem or there's an issue, I am not compelled to release it.
That's right.
I am not compelled as a broker. Take it to court.
And if you can't.
So I'm not.
It goes to the state after 3 years.
Yes, it is sheets. So, or if it is going to go to court, I can give it to the court and let them decide. But there's nothing that says that I have to release it based on that. You know, I know you're reading through, and I appreciate that you really understand the rules. But that when a buyer and a seller sign off to release it, I'm good. Okay, if they sign off to split it, I'm good. But there's nothing that says I have to release it without agreement. There has to be an agreement. Now, the case is being made that on the purchase agreement, the seller agreed to abide by those rules. And I understand that. And in Illinois, it says clearly, if agreed to in the purchase document, then yes. But we get these things in where, you know, the buyer says, I don't agree. You know, I don't agree with the inspection response, so I'm canceling. And it's like, and the buyers, yes, and I get the earnest money back, all those kinds of things. But I have to make sure that seller agrees. Because there can be a disagreement on that. There can be a disagreement that,
Broker pays.
yes. So like there's the financing part, and it says they get their earnest money back. But it also, above that, says the buyer needs to make a good faith effort. Okay, the buyer said. So if the seller is like, no, they didn't make no good faith effort. So then it's like, okay, after a period of time, 30 days on the buyer's getting it back with a 30-day notice, it can be released to the buyer. And there's notice sent to the buyer and seller. That's to see if they're going to file. On the sellers, if the sellers are getting the money back, if I'm like, hey, it makes sense, sellers ought to get the money back on this. Then it's 6 months, and then a 30-day notice goes out, and it says, we're giving this to the buyer, or we're giving this to the seller. And the buyer then has the opportunity to bring suit about that. But there, yeah, I mean, I trust you, Fix, that you study like crazy, but you have to trust me that as the principal broker, I've read every single thing that has to do with earnest money. And at this point, we're going to agree to disagree.
No, I mean, it comes down to, you guys think, seems like every broker takes a stance that when they reply to it, we're not lawyers and we're not judges, so we don't have to make a definitive judgment on this one.
KW does not, they do not do anything. If the seller doesn't agree to release back to the buyer, KW throws their hands up and goes, oh, I'm sorry. They don't even look at it. I at least look at it and try to make a determination. But and it's all kinds of things. It's like from data dispute, and people never fill one of these out. And so there's no data dispute. I'm like, what date am I supposed to start? Nobody said anything. So yeah, it's a bunch of stuff. But get this top part, the purchase agreement release is of utmost importance. It gives the buyer the opportunity to go somewhere else and buy something, gives the seller the opportunity to go ahead and sell it, and there's no encumbrances as part of it. If there's a dispute on this, then we'll figure that out. Make one thing too. If I get it as a dispute and I have to make a decision, I do not have the ability to negotiate a between the two. Like, well, you know, as a broker, I call and go, you know, I could give you half and you half. I don't do that. That's the agents. The agents need to do that. I get to say it's yours or it's yours, nothing else. All right? Okay, enough on that. This, it's in the library on .loop, yes. Okay. Now, signing documents. There's power of attorney, trust, estates, and LLCs, some information about it. But all of it's here. We put this in .loop. So when you get into that, because we're not supposed to know how all this works. So we've had the attorneys write this up, look it over, make sure it's good. And so when somebody goes, well, I'm power of attorney, what do I do? You go to this and you go, here's what you do. Okay? Because if you make a mistake, you're not an attorney. Don't do it. Okay? So that's actually something that came from the Quad Cities that was wonderful. And we had it checked over by our attorney to make sure he agreed and it was good. And God, we're getting so close. I hope you guys have learned something. Because if not, I've really screwed up. So, listen, and the other thing is too, I'm always available. You can call me. You got a question, you're not sure about something, you wonder how this works or what that does, how that might happen, anything, call me. Most times I answer. Most times we'll get through it and we'll figure it out. And if I don't know the answer, which is highly likely. If I don't know the answer, I'll find it and we'll get it to you and that kind of stuff. Okay. So with that being said, who knows what this is?
I do.
A sales worksheet. Some of you don't. Some of you don't. Okay, it has lines and places to fill stuff in. Okay, so the closing department has no clue what somebody's phone number is unless you write it down here. They have no clue what it's supposed to be. They are not going to read through your purchase agreement and try to pick out all the details and everything. Okay, compliance is there to make sure things are signed, make sure that kind of stuff happened, but they're not there to check over your work. Okay, so take the time, give them a little bit of help and fill out, like, you know what, just take your phone out and look, you've probably called the listing agent or the buyer's agent and their phone number's in there. All you got to do is write it down. You know, there's a lot of stuff here, and I know you don't have to do everything, but you do know who the listing agent is. You probably know who the lender is. You might actually know their number, and you could put that in there. So take the time, give them a fighting chance. We're getting ready to hit the busy season again. Give them a little bit of help. Fill that out for them. With that, any other questions? Anything that I can answer about anything?
Nothing changed on the sales worksheet though. Just
No,
reminding us.
the sales were, it's just, I was surprisingly, I was asked if I would mention that there is one. Because we sometimes forget to get that taken care of. Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Tell other people to read through the documents. This is recorded and will be available. And with any luck, Becca heard a couple of things that she could write down. I don't know, Becca, is there a couple of points you could? Okay. Thank you all for taking the time. I